Welcome to the Aid Market Podcast, where foreign aid partners connect to learn about key funding trends and market insight. The podcast is co-hosted by Aid Connect Data, the pipeline and market intel software for USAID partnering, and Konektid International, the leading USAID partnering support consulting firm. Now, here's your host, Mike Shanley.
Welcome to the Aid Market Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have the Konektid team on here. We have Christy Hollywood, the Chief Operating Officer at Konektid, and Olivia Tisa, the Konektid's manager, who leads account management with all our clients. We're going to be talking about USAID market, proposal trends, business development trends, funding trends, election trends here. So with that, we're going to get right into it. So Christy, jumping right to you first. Let's talk about overall market trends, budget, business development. What are you seeing as some of the most important trends in the USAID funding market?
I think everybody in the development community has seen a lot of the same trends coming up again and again. One of them that struck me this week was the mechanism contract vehicle trends at USAID and the transparency about what they're using. We've seen OASIS get used a lot more. I don't think I've seen a vehicle like that be used for an RFI before, to narrow it down to just the holders. That was unusual. I know a lot of folks want to see more transparency about what contract mechanisms are being considered, even if there isn't a final determination. I think having clear swim lines about what vehicles are used for what would make a lot of sense. And I know other agencies have much clearer lines delineating that to have better ability of the industry to be able to prepare. One of the other things that I'm really excited about is on the small business side. USAID has said that they're going to be looking at expanding beyond the traditional small business sectors of IT, institutional support, and MEL. Really excited about that. Also excited that the burden busting, the next step is going to be really looking at what limits the participation and increases burdens on some of those historically disadvantaged businesses.
Okay, great. What about on budget trends? What have you seen there? I know you've done some research for our clients and for the industry overall recently. What are some of the updates that you've seen?
I mean, I think we're in the budget that was just passed. There's some cuts. In general, things are mostly flat, though, which is nice. The humanitarian funding IDA account is up about 800 million. It's not as much as they're going to need to meet the current crisis levels that we're facing worldwide. PEPFAR was reauthorized for a year, so continuing battles there next year. Global health security, depending on which program, it's flat or up or down. 200 million total reduction. So hopefully that's spread pretty broadly. The economic security fund cuts are the other one that I wanted to kind of focus on a little bit. That's going to hit conflict and stability operations, the Office for Global Women's Issues, and some of DDI. So I'm not quite sure how deep those cuts are. I'm still plowing through. And then Food for Peace was reduced slightly in the Ag Bill. I think we're likely to see some similar things. And when we talk later about the elections and what that might foretell, we could talk 2 years out. But I think for the coming year, that's probably about what we'll see.
And this is all in light of Jamie Rogers taking over at USAID. The obligated amount was over $38 billion last year. That's continues to rise. And that's one thing I've just shared with clients regularly is in my 20 years in the market, yes, the priorities change, but the overall trend has been a significant increase in total funding for USAID over that time. All right, to Olivia next. Olivia, can you talk about a little bit about what you're seeing in USAID proposal trends?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Mike. So one of the things that we're seeing again this year, similar to last spring, is a delay in RFP releases. So we're seeing this shift of about 4 to 6 weeks from the initial forecasted release without seeing that update in the forecast. So we're seeing that this is impacting some of the organizational capacity of our clients and of USAID partners as they're preparing for these opportunities and then have to make those shifts in things like staffing and resources and go decisions. In a similar vein, and Christy kind of touched on it, we're also seeing changes in how opportunities are presented in the forecast. So we're seeing them maybe presented as a COAG and then turn to contract when released. And we're seeing USAID kind of start to change some of their barriers to reduce burden. So we're seeing a little bit in terms of not naming key personnel and evaluation criteria when folks are submitting proposals.
And what about, we talked a little bit about before. Oh, I'm sorry, Christy. Go for it.
Oh, no, that's okay. I would just add a couple other points that I've been hearing from folks across the industry. One is that there's QASP, the quality assurance plans, and performance work statements continue to be mainstreamed at USAID. So we're seeing more and more of those still, as a lot of the procurement trends go from DoD starting them to Treasury to general civilian, and then USAID usually picks it up late. But it's interesting to see how broadly that's being adopted now. On the pricing side, in addition to seeing folks budget with less headquarter spend, headquarter support than historically, there is, due to the inflation in sub-Saharan Africa, more dollar pegs of local salaries. We've seen that in Malawi in the past. Now we're seeing that in Kenya and Ghana and potentially other places soon.
Mm-hmm. And what about, Olivia, we were talking before about go, no-go decisions and AI in proposals, as well as small business usage. Could you touch on a couple of those points?
Yeah, definitely. So we are seeing, at least amongst our clients, an increased intentionality on go, no-go decisions. So really using that capture phase and in some cases, the delay and release to determine whether or not they're well positioned to bid, whether that be as a sub or a prime. In terms of small business, USAID just released that in fiscal year 23, they awarded nearly $1 billion to small businesses. So they are hitting their goals and they're on track to sustain and accomplish these goals in the coming year. But we are seeing from fiscal 23 numbers that there is room for improvement in awarding work to HubZone and service disabled veteran small businesses. So there's definitely that gap. And then of course, AI, we'd be remiss not to touch on it because it's everywhere these days. But we are seeing some clients and consultants starting to experiment with AI. We've yet to see anything used consistently across the board, but resources like ChatGPT and other AI editing tools have been used with the extreme emphasis that AI is not on track and will by no means replace human writers, rather used as a resource or a tool to enhance writing, creativity, editing, decreasing that human error, and increasing efficiency.
Thanks, Olivia. And quick note for any small businesses listening, USAID has their small business conference coming up in mid-May. Registration is now open for that. Go ahead and just message me or Olivia or Christy on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to send over that link. And then also on the AI note, my team at Aid Connect are hard at work on some AI applications for USAID business development. So definitely message me if you're interested in seeing some of the early, some of the stuff we're working on there. I'd be happy to connect with you on that. Moving right along then, it's 2024. This is an election year. Christy, could you frame that a little bit for us in terms of what we're looking at, and of course, we're most interested in how this could potentially affect the USAID market and partners.
Sure. You know me, I always like to talk about elections and potential changes in administration. So this is a great time to start scenario planning. We're 8-9 months out from January. So really think about what a change might mean for your organization as you're doing your planning. regardless of who wins the election this time, we're going to see some continued streamlining of procurement and increased localization of the partner base. That will vary probably in intensity, depending who wins. But that's all kind of reading tea leaves. If Biden is reelected, we're probably still going to have some Hill battles going on. I think that is something that would be likely to continue. And then current trends would be there as well. If Trump wins, it's pretty unpredictable. People are all over the map on thinking where this might land in terms of foreign assistance and development money. Best case scenario is probably like last time, where tremendous cuts or revisions are suggested and the Senate may hold the line. The Senate's had a lot of turnover. So that's a question. Lots of people are looking at Project 2025 from Heritage, although a lot of folks on the Trump side occasionally disparage Heritage as part of the swamp. So we're not sure how much any of the recommendations will be taken, how seriously they'll be taken. In terms of the broad so what's, to hedge if there is a Republican administration, 2019 funding levels, go back and look and see what those were for your work. And that's a likely scenario. Listen to the Aid Market podcast that Mike did with Governor David Beasley. It's a really good way to learn how to speak about development in ways that resonate much more broadly than with just the current administration. Some of you are really good at that already, but for those who aren't, it's a really good way to think about things. If you remember the journey to self-reliance, when localization seemed to actually get teeth for the first time, those exit transition strategies we had to include in every bid, those are probably going to come back if Trump wins. And consider in your communications the priorities of both. I can get into some more detail if you'd like on different geographies and priorities, but that's the big picture. And keep in mind when you're talking to your USAID counterparts that a lot of folks there, just through informal conversations, are already deeply concerned about potential reductions in force, overhauls of different bureaus, and what it might mean for them. So keep that in mind and be sensitive to that as we go into another election cycle. It's always a tough time for folks on both sides.
That's a great reminder, Christy. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And then you also had a suggestion that we discussed looking at the 2019 budget. So in terms of tactical steps for organizations, what are some things they can start thinking through to see how well they might be positioned for probably either of the two most likely outcomes in the next election?
Yeah, I mean, I think take a look at your current portfolio and where that might lie with different priorities. So think about partnerships that you might start forming now as kind of a hedge. One of the things that comes out in a lot of writing from the conservative side is tying things more directly to national security. So for example, the Indo-Pacific strategy would likely be guiding any foreign aid in the region. Think about another shift in the Mexico City policy, not really a big surprise. Think about how you might better partner with faith-based organizations locally or internationally. That will likely be a really big push. And really think about overall how you can work better with local organizations on the ground and form real meaningful partnerships where more of a marriage of equals and strengthening their capacity where they want capacity strengthened.
Great thing. Yeah, I think all of that, and some of that is just important even in a non-election year. It's focused on the impact, focus on the why behind the work that we do. Why are we doing it? And then what's that return on the investment? What's the value? What's the total cost of a project? And what's the return that you get from it? Is that worthwhile? And just keep focusing on that message. I remember back to right when Trump came to office, 2017, then that the not just the aid industry, but also the Defense Department, former defense generals, former senior officials in the Defense Department, really spoke highly of the importance of aid, that the 3Ds, development, diplomacy, and defense, aid is an essential part of it. There was also very broad, Congress looked a little different at the time, but it was very broad congressional support by Senate Republicans at the time. Now, most, or maybe a couple of them are still there, but I think it's always interesting to see the different, not just priorities as more national security or trade over humanitarian assistance, but looking at who those supporters are. And that's one thing, maybe my view on it has been, there's always been broad support for aid. And the dollar amount over the last couple of decades has continued to increase. What does change, though, are those priorities. So thinking about if you're doing climate change activities, what are some priorities that would likely be emphasized under either administration, that past performance, that experience can fall under.
Yeah, the other thing that I'd add on to that is, like, within health, we've already been seeing a move toward health system strengthening for years, and away from disease-specific interventions. But I think that trend, really looking at health holistically, and less population-specific, but how can we really strengthen the ability to do things at a national, local, regional level, will be much more emphasized. So think about that too. I know a lot of folks have health as part of your portfolios.
Great. Olivia, I know you're recently at Creed's second anniversary event. Administrator Samantha Powers spoke there. Could you maybe share a little bit about what she spoke about, or anything that you found interesting that she highlighted during that talk?
Yeah, definitely. So I got to attend this week. And as you already said, Samantha Power was the keynote. She used some of her time to discuss how USAID recently launched the largest FSN, or Foreign Service National Empowerment Program, with the program to be renewed every 2 years. So the program emphasizes professional development and career advancement opportunities to USAID and country staff with a specific equity lens. She shared a really important statistic that more than 2/3 of USAID's workforce is made up of country nationals. So this program is specifically and inherently imperative to USAID's prioritized DEIA initiatives to create more equitable opportunities and advancement for all staff around the world. And then she also briefly touched on the importance of localization, and how using FSN staff as the face and the head of offices in country is really impactful to the implementation of programming.
And that's, I think, a very important thing to emphasize too. We'll get to it in a short couple minutes here, but what's going to stay the same? FSN, so many of them have been there for years, and as the staff rotate in and out, they're there. They know the historical investments of the mission, what they've done in the past, what's worked, what doesn't work, the local context. So also, as we'll get into capture trips in a bit too, but as you're doing your travel, or doing your operations in country, definitely make sure to prioritize building those relationships with USAID's FSN staff, the Foreign Service Nationals, in the missions. Great. Yeah. Christy, any other general market thoughts that you've been mulling over?
General market. I've been doing scenario planning in my head a lot lately, to be really honest. I think there's a lot of chatter about what might change in terms of DEIA and gender offices. And I think from what I've been reading and hearing, it looks like there will likely be a lot of roles eliminated, but things will still be there. There'll just be a different focus. So like DEIA might move back to the Civil Rights Office. Gender will likely, as will a lot of programming, potentially be refocused on women, children, and families. That sort of thing. On localization, there's so much there. I know the Office of Inspector General recently released a report on the new partnership initiative. At about the same time that the Local Capacity Strengthening Policy Forum released some of their collateral. Really excited to see both and both acknowledging we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. The OIG report talked about missions are hesitant to work with local partners directly for the same reasons they've always been hesitant to work with them, and that some of the metrics are hard to measure. The respondents to the policy forum, about 17% of them, 15% of them, didn't feel USAID always acts in line with their local capacity strengthening policy. A lot of folks did, though. And a lot of the attendees seemed not to feel that they were getting the capacity strengthening that they wanted, that it was more compliance. So there's a lot of room there to continue to grow. I think some of the things that were brought up on the recent quarterly forecast call made me really happy, like the continued translation of materials. That's huge. I noted they were translating some of them into Amharic and Portuguese, which is a little hint at who might be going next for really focusing on local. And that FSM participation you were just talking about, that's tremendous. I'm really excited to see that more and folks actually holding warrants to sign things. So
Great. So we're talking about trends, what's changed. I think a great thing is we were talking about in the prep, one of Warren Buffett's investing strategies has been not focused on what's going to change or try to guess the future and what the world's going to look like, but what's going to stay the same. So in line with that, what are some of the things that, regardless of what changes there are on the political level, will be staying the same? Olivia, do you want to share a couple initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can kick us off. I mean, what's going to stay the same is an emphasis on localization and working with partners, as well as, and Christy can say it better herself, but that the work here is still important, that there's still work that needs to be done, and that it's needed. However, what it manifests as in terms of how it's proposed or what focus areas are prioritized, are going to be what we see changing.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. Christy, other things to add to that?
I think she hit it on the nose. I think the humanitarian needs continue to grow. I know there have been lots of shifts trying to get that done in a way that is more beneficial and sustainable locally, whether it's cash spent regionally or locally, those sorts of things. I think that's going to increase. The health system strengthening we talked about, the diversification of your partners that you're working with as an organization, not just USAID, working with more diverse partners.
And one thing, in my time in the market, what I've seen over and over is that even with new initiatives, whether it was USAID Forward, localization, new partnerships initiative, one thing that really is never compromised is past performance and expertise. Where I have rarely, if ever, seen, oh, you're a local partner, you've never done this work, but we're supposed to work with local partners. Here's the funding. Good luck. No, you still have to have that past performance. Capture work, planning work has to start early. We have to be strategic about this. Over the last decade, there's been a couple times I've got emails from interested clients with, hey, here's an RFP, it's live. I have 2 weeks to submit this. Can we, let's work together. I'm like, let's look out 1 to 2 years about what's coming out next. You're going to be competing against established partners with strong past performance who have been working on this for months, if not over a year. So matching to the 3 Ps we've developed, matching your past performance to the funding, to the past performance, to the procurements, to the projects, and then finding those right partners. That's really the core of it. And then staying aware of these other trends and how they fit in. But thinking in terms of, first principles, I guess, of USAID business development. That's the piece that we really want to come back to. And then strong responsive proposals, understanding what USAID wants, understanding your past performance, and then putting the right team and approach together for that. So as we get close to wrapping it up, what we always want to leave the audience, the aid organizations and development organizations around the world, the business development teams, with a very practical, tactical so what. Christy, to you first, what would your the so what be? It can be so what's. And then what are some of the things that you're going to be watching over the next year?
I think my big so what is, as usual, start early. Always start early. Really try to get ahead of what the forecast is predicting. If it's on the forecast, it's likely already late. And I think some of the scenario planning we were talking about is part of that. I think really having great contacts and networks in country and using your local offices for your BD as well as project implementation is critical. And those things are just going to continue.
Olivia, do you have any so what thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I think my big so what is diversify and adapt. So as we're seeing trending changes and continual trends in proposals and in USAID work, diversifying your organizations and adapting them to meet the moment. But I'm also really looking forward and hoping to see increased emphasis on DEIA initiatives, not only coming from USAID, but being reinforced and most importantly, being held accountable by implementing partners. So as those initiatives start to come out of USAID, seeing the confidence build from implementing partners to push back and to take DEIA initiatives seriously.
And those interested in learning more about that, USAID's Chief Diversity Officer, Nene Diallo, she also was a past guest on the podcast, so you can listen to the episode with her on this show. One common question I get are, what are the conferences you go to? So if you want to connect with us, please message any one of us on LinkedIn or come to some of these events. We will be at the SID conference at the end of April. That's in Washington, D.C. We'll be at the USAID Small Business conference in mid-May. So definitely message us if you're interested in any details about that. Also for any European partners on there, I'll be back in Europe in October for a couple events with USAID, and I'll be at the ADEX conference in Geneva, and then working on a few other ones. So if you're in Europe, definitely message us. For those of you who don't know, Konektid, we are a consulting firm that help organizations to work with USAID. So we work with USAID's largest primes to help them with proposal development and business development strategy. We work with subcontractors with USAID small businesses to help with their market positioning, even if they're not working on proposals. How do they get positioned in the market? Who do they connect with? How do they best find that fit in the USAID market? And with organizations that are assessing, is this the right market for me? So definitely message any of us if you're interested in learning more about those services. And of course, subscribe to the AID Market Podcast. We have some very exciting shows coming up. Two confirmed is an upcoming show with senior USAID official on private sector development, as well as it's OTI's 30th anniversary. So we'll be having one of the senior OTI officials on here and some other very exciting guests that will be announced shortly. If we're not connected, definitely connect or follow me on LinkedIn so you can see the announcements for those. And we have a weekly newsletter, so you can subscribe at konektid.com, konektid.com, to stay updated and all that. So, Olivia and Christy, thank you all for taking a half hour out of their busy schedule, supporting our clients, USAID partners around the world. Really appreciate the insight. Thanks to all listening. Have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to the AID Market Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and connect with Mike Shanley on LinkedIn to stay updated on the latest USAID funding trends.